Big John Studd was a wrestling colossus, a man who towered above nearly everyone he met, not just in stature, but in presence. He was one of those rare figures who seemed born for the squared circle, but his life was tragically cut short, not by an opponent in the ring, but by a relentless illness outside of it. This is the story of a giant, a villain, a hero, and ultimately a fighter who never stopped battling until the very end. John William Minton, the man the world would come to know as Big John Studd, entered the world in 1948. From the very start, he seemed larger than life. By the time he reached adulthood, he stood an astonishing 6 foot 10 inches tall and carried over 350 pounds on his frame. He wasn't just a big man. He was a skyscraper in human form, the kind of figure that made people stop and stare. Wrestling was almost destined for him. His size alone made him a natural fit. He began his professional wrestling journey in the 1970s, stepping into a world filled with colorful personalities and brutal competition. Quickly, he carved out a place for himself, bouncing between major promotions like the NWA and eventually the WWF, where his star truly began to shine. Studd had a gift, not just for wrestling but for showmanship. He understood what made fans tick. He knew how to make them cheer, but even better, he knew how to make them boo. He perfected the art of being the villain, and make no mistake, he was one of the most effective heels of his era. Studd could get under the skin of an audience with ease. His arrogance, his towering frame, and his willingness to play dirty in the ring made him the kind of wrestler you loved to hate. Who could forget the infamous night when he and Ken Patera shaved the head of Andre the Giant? It wasn't just shocking, it was cruel. And that was exactly the point. Studd wanted you to loathe him, and he did his job so well that fans wanted to jump through their TV screens and clothesline him themselves. Then there was the unforgettable Body Slam challenge at WrestleMania Y. That moment cemented him in wrestling history. He dared anyone to try and slam him, offering $15,000 to whoever could pull it off. And when Andre the Giant rose to the challenge and delivered, it wasn't just a wrestling move. It was a spectacle, the kind of moment that defined an era. But beyond the bright lights of the arena, Studd's life wasn't always as glamorous. As the years rolled on, he began to face battles that couldn't be scripted, challenges that no opponent in the ring could ever truly prepare him for. In the fall of 1993, with the crispness of autumn in the air and life seemingly moving forward as normal, he discovered a small lump in his armpit. At first it didn't seem like much. Just a little bump, painless and unassuming, but deep down, he must have known it wasn't supposed to be there. He went to the doctor, like anyone would, and the news that followed changed everything. It was cancer. A massive tumor was growing in his chest. For a man who had built his life on toughness, resilience and strength, hearing those words must have felt like a body blow he couldn't see coming. Fear, shock, disbelief, all of it must have washed over him. But Studd wasn't about to lay down and accept defeat. If life had taught him anything, it was that a true fighter never quits. He began chemotherapy, and if you know anything about that process, you know it's grueling. It strips you down, leaves you exhausted, nauseous, weak. But Studd endured it. Slowly the treatments began to work. The tumor started to shrink. He began feeling better. For a moment there was hope. Doctors even told him that if things continued to improve, he might be able to return to the ring in just 6 months. Imagine the joy that must have given him. The thought of lacing up his boots, stepping back into the squared circle, and hearing the roar of the crowd again. But cancer is a cruel and deceptive enemy. Just when you think you've beaten it, it can come creeping back. In 1994, that's exactly what happened. The tumor returned, striking like a sucker punch. This time it was even more complicated. Doctors suggested a bone marrow transplant, a dangerous but potentially life-saving procedure. But there was a catch. They couldn't find a suitable donor. Without one, the options were limited, and the prognosis was grim. They told him he had about a month to live. For most people that kind of news would shatter every ounce of hope. But John Minton wasn't most people. He wasn't ready to throw in the towel. With his back against the wall, he chose to undergo an extremely risky procedure called an autologous transplantation. It was a desperate gamble, with only a 7% chance of success, the kind of odds that would scare anyone. But Stud was used to long odds. He rolled the dice, and miraculously, it worked. Against all expectations, the tumor disappeared again. He went home, surrounded by family and friends, and for a brief moment, it looked like he had pulled off the comeback of a lifetime. It was as if the giant had once again stood tall, victorious over an opponent that had nearly taken him down. But fate wasn't done testing him. In September 1994, just months after his apparent recovery, his lungs collapsed. Another setback, another hospital visit, another mountain to climb, and yet even then he kept fighting. He never let his spirit break. In February of 1995, he returned to the hospital for yet another round of chemotherapy, but this time, the news was devastating. The cancer had spread throughout his body. The fight was nearly over. On March 20, 1995, John Minton, Big John Stud, passed away peacefully. He was just 47 years old. A man who had stood taller than life itself was gone, but his battle, his resilience, and his courage left behind a story that continues to inspire. Stud was more than just a wrestler. He was a husband to Donna, and a father to 3 children, Robert, Janelle and Sean. He loved his family deeply, and in his final years, he poured much of his time and energy into them. His son Sean even carried on his legacy, stepping into the wrestling world under the name Big Sean Stud. Outside the ring, John was also a businessman. He launched his own line of workout supplements and vitamins, turning his passion for fitness into something that could help others stay strong and healthy. He even mentored younger wrestlers, including Ron Reis, who later performed in WCW as Big Ron Stud. He promoted boxing events, stayed active in the sports world, and never truly left the industry he loved. As for his wrestling career, his legacy speaks for itself. From battles with Chief Jay Strongbow, Gorilla Monsoon, and Pedro Morales, to championship runs in the Mid-Atlantic Territory, alongside Ken Patera, to challenging Dusty Rhodes for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, Stud's career was filled with highlights. Even though he never held the WWF World title, he cemented himself as a main event attraction. The 1980s were his golden years. Fans still remember his towering feuds with Hulk Hogan, and especially his legendary rivalry with Andre the Giant. Their battles weren't just wrestling matches, they were spectacles about pride, power, and proving who the true giant of wrestling really was. The drama of those clashes created memories that fans still talk about decades later. In 1988, after a break from wrestling, Stud returned to the WWF, but this time, he wasn't the villain anymore. He refused Bobby Heenan's offer to rejoin his faction, and for the first time, the fans saw him as a hero. It all built to one of his greatest moments, winning the 1989 Royal Rumble. Outlasting other top stars, Stud showed the world that he was still a force to be reckoned with. That victory became one of the crowning achievements of his career. His final major WWF appearance came at WrestleMania XV, where he served as guest referee for the clash between Andre and Jake the Snake Roberts. Not long after, he wrestled on the independent circuit before retiring in 1993, right before his health began to fail. Today, Big John Stud's name still carries weight. He wasn't just another big guy in wrestling, he was the giant who helped define an era. He paved the way for future big men, proving that size and charisma could make you a star. His matches told stories, his rivalries created unforgettable moments, and his legacy continues to loom large over the wrestling world. When fans look back on the golden era of professional wrestling, they remember Big John Stud, not just for his size, but for his presence. He was a trailblazer, a powerhouse, and a man who gave everything to the sport he loved. From his epic clashes with Andre to his iconic Royal Rumble win, his career remains a vital chapter in wrestling history. Though his life ended far too soon, his influence never faded. His story reminds us that giants aren't measured only in height or weight, they're measured in heart, spirit, and the mark they leave behind. Big John Stud left his mark on wrestling forever, and even in death, his legacy continues to stand tall.